The space station floated high above Earth, spinning slowly in the darkness. Gateway 7 was humanity's pride, a massive structure of metal and glass where humans met aliens from across the galaxy. Ships came and went every day, bringing strange beings who wanted to trade with Earth. Jake Morrison stood by the large window watching the stars. He was 32 years old and commanded this station. His dark hair was cut short, and his uniform was always perfect. People said he was good at his job, calm when things went wrong. Today felt like any other day. Ships were docking, cargo was moving, and everything seemed normal. Lisa Hayes walked up beside him. She was a scientist who studied alien life forms. Her red hair was tied back, and she carried a data pad in her hands. "The Vocari are here," she said. "They want to come on board." Jake looked at his pad. The Vocari were reptile-like aliens, tall and covered in green scales. They were known for being aggressive in business deals. Their leader was named Scrath, and he had a bad reputation. Last time the Vocari visited, they tried to bring weapons onto the station without permission. "Let them dock at Bay 3, Jake said, "but tell security to watch them closely." Dan Cooper was excited. He was only 24 and had just finished his training. This was his first real job as a security officer on Gateway 7. When his boss told him to escort the Vocari delegation, Dan felt proud. This was his chance to show everyone he could handle important work. The Vocari walked through the corridors like they owned the place. They were huge, almost 8 feet tall, and their scales made soft clicking sounds as they moved. Scrath led the group, his yellow eyes looking at everything. Dan walked beside them, trying to look professional and confident. Then Dan noticed something. One of the Vocari was carrying a sealed container. Dan checked his list. The container was not listed anywhere. According to the rules, everything had to be scanned before it could go into the civilian areas of the station. "Excuse me," Dan said, stepping forward. His voice sounded too loud in his own ears. "I need to scan that container." Scrath turned his massive head. His jaw moved in a strange way. "That container holds religious items. Your machines will damage them." Dan felt uncertain. They had trained him to respect alien cultures. But they also trained him to follow security rules. Every container had to be scanned. No exceptions. "I understand, sir," Dan said, "but all containers must be scanned." The Vocari holding the container was named Grash. He was younger than the others and seemed angry. Suddenly, Grash moved forward quickly. Maybe he was just frustrated. Maybe he was trying to push past Dan. No one would ever know for sure what Grash intended. Dan reacted without thinking. His training took over. His hand went to his weapon. The plasma gun fired with a bright flash. Grash fell backward, his huge body hitting the floor hard. Green blood began to pool around him, spreading across the white floor. Everything went silent. The other Vocari stood frozen. Dan stood frozen, too, his weapon still in his hand, staring at what he had done. Then Scrath roared. The sound was so loud it echoed through the entire corridor. "You killed him. You killed a member of a diplomatic group. This is war." Jake and Lisa arrived within minutes. They ran through the corridors, following the sound of Scrath's roaring. When they reached the scene, they found Dan standing there, shaking. The other Vocari had surrounded Grash's body. They looked ready to attack anyone who came near. "Lower your weapon, Lieutenant," Jake said quietly. Dan's hand was shaking so badly he could barely put the gun back in its holder. Jake walked slowly toward Scrath, holding his hands up to show he meant no harm. "Trademaster, this was an accident. We can look at the security recordings and see exactly what happened." Scrath's eyes burned with hatred. "What happened is that your human murdered a Vocari. We came here under diplomatic protection. Your people have shown what you really are. You are violent and primitive. You do not deserve to be part of the galactic community." Lisa tried to help. "The container that Grash was carrying, what is inside? If we can show there was a real security concern." Another Vocari pushed forward. He had special markings on his scales. "You dare question us after killing one of our own? The Vocari Collective will hear about this. Every species in the coalition will know that humans cannot be trusted." More security officers arrived. They secured the area, keeping everyone back. Medical teams came, but there was nothing they could do. Grash was dead, the first alien to die at human hands since Earth joined the galactic community. Jake felt cold fear in his chest. This was not just a problem. This was disaster. One dead alien could destroy everything humanity had worked for. Earth had spent decades trying to prove humans deserved a place among the stars. Now, in one moment, all of that was at risk. The Vocari refused to leave until they had removed Grash's body. They performed some kind of ceremony right there in the corridor, chanting in their language. Station personnel watched from a distance. Everyone knew this was bad. Everyone could feel that something had changed. When the Vocari finally left, they did not say goodbye. Scrath looked at Jake one last time. "This is not over, human. Your world will pay for this crime." After they were gone, Jake called a meeting with his senior staff. Lisa was there along with the head of security and the station's lawyer. They watched the security footage over and over. The video was clear. Dan had fired first. But the footage also showed that Grash had moved suddenly toward Dan. Was it aggressive? Was it threatening? To a human, maybe. But the Vocari might see it differently. "We need to report this to Earth immediately," the lawyer said. "And we need to prepare a defense for Lieutenant Cooper." Dan was in a holding cell, not because he was under arrest, but for his own protection. He sat on the bench with his head in his hands. He kept seeing Grash fall over and over in his mind. Jake went to see him. "Dan, I need you to tell me exactly what you were thinking." Dan looked up. His eyes were red. "He moved toward me fast. I thought he was attacking. I just reacted. I did what they trained me to do." "I know," Jake said. He wanted to tell Dan it would be okay, but he could not lie. Nothing about this was okay. News of the incident spread fast. Within hours, every alien species knew about it. Within a day, Earth's ambassadors were being called to answer questions. The galactic community wanted answers. They wanted justice, and many of them wanted revenge. Gateway 7 felt different now. The usual traffic of ships slowed down. Some aliens canceled their visits. Others came just to look at humans with suspicion and fear. The station that had been a symbol of cooperation now felt like a prison. Jake stood at the window again that night, looking down at Earth. The planet looked so peaceful from up here, so beautiful. But he knew that peace was about to end. One human had pulled a trigger, and now an entire world would pay the price. Ambassador Helen Grant had not slept in 2 days. She sat in the waiting room outside the Coalition Council chamber, going over her notes one more time. Helen was 53 years old, with blonde hair that was turning gray. She had been a diplomat for 30 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. The doors opened. A small robot floated out and spoke in a mechanical voice. "The council will see you now." Helen walked into the huge circular room. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in a semicircle around her. Some looked like insects. Some looked like they were made of light. Others were so strange she could not describe them. All of them were staring at her. Helen stood in the center of the room and began to speak. "The human delegation wishes to express our deepest sorrow for what happened. Lieutenant Cooper has been arrested. We are investigating everything. We believe this was a tragic mistake, not an attack." The Vocari representative stood up. His name was Threxus, and he was very old. His scales were dull with age, but his eyes were sharp. "A mistake? One of our people is dead, killed by human violence, and you call it a mistake?" Many of the other representatives made sounds of agreement. Helen could see aliens who had been friendly to Earth before now looking at her with cold eyes. Everything was falling apart. Captain Alan Price sat behind Helen. He was in charge of Earth's military connection to the Coalition. His gray hair was cut very short, and his face showed his worry. He leaned forward and whispered, "They are turning everyone against us. We need to control this situation before it is too late." But it was already too late. An insect-like alien named Chitterclicks spoke up. His voice came through a translator. "The Krillian Hive has always questioned if humans were ready for galactic society. Maybe this proves they need more time to evolve beyond their violent nature." Other species joined in. Some had competed with Earth for trade deals and saw a chance to push humans down. The Selenar, beings made of pure energy, suggested putting limits on where humans could go. The Drumoth, a warrior species that valued honor, said Dan Cooper should be given to the Vokari for punishment. Helen fought back with everything she knew. She talked about the treaties Earth had signed. She mentioned the scientific discoveries human researchers had made. She reminded them of all the good things humans had done, but with each argument she could feel she was losing. Back on Gateway 7, Jake was doing his own investigation. He watched the security footage again and again. The video was clear. Dan had fired first, but when Jake slowed down the footage, he could see that Grash's movement might have looked threatening to a young, scared human. The problem was that different species saw things differently. Lisa came into Jake's office carrying her datapad. "We are being set up," she said. "Look at this." The Vokari delegation changed their route 3 times before they got to that corridor. They could have taken the direct path to the meeting rooms. Instead, they went through a section where they knew a young, inexperienced officer would be on duty. Jake studied the timeline on his screen. "You think they wanted this to happen?" "I think someone wanted an incident," Lisa said carefully. "Maybe the Vokari themselves. Maybe someone else manipulating the situation. But it is too convenient." On Earth, the news caused panic. President Linda Carter spoke to the world from the White House. She looked calm, but people who knew her could see she was worried. She was the first president to lead Earth while it was part of the Galactic Coalition. Now that membership was in danger. "We will not abandon our values or our people," President Carter said. Lieutenant Cooper acted according to his training and what he thought was a threat. "We are sad about the Vokari trader's death, but we will not sacrifice our own people to political pressure." Those words were meant to make humans feel better, but they made the Coalition angry. Within days, some species stopped trading with Earth. Several aliens took their ambassadors away from Earth. Worse, rumors started that the Coalition might vote to kick humanity out completely, cutting Earth off from the galactic community. Commander Greg Phillips was in charge of Earth's Deep Space Defense Network. He was known for seeing patterns others missed. He called an emergency meeting with military leaders. "This is not just about one dead Vokari," he told the group. "This is about power. Humanity has been advancing too fast, making too much money, discovering too much science. Some species want to knock us down before we become a real threat to them. So what do we do?" asked Admiral Kate Bennett. She commanded Earth's space fleet. She was tough, with short black hair and an attitude built from 30 years in the military. "We prepare," Greg said quietly, "because if they vote to kick us out of the Coalition, we need to be ready for what comes next." What came next was worse than anyone thought possible. The Coalition Council met for the formal vote. The meeting was broadcast across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as they decided humanity's fate. Ambassador Helen Grant spoke one last time. "We ask not for special treatment, but for fairness. Judge us not by one tragic incident, but by what we have contributed our efforts toward peace and our potential as partners." The vote was called. Species after species registered their decision. Some, like the Centauri Alliance and the Meridian Collective, spoke in support of humanity. But they were outnumbered by those who voted to kick Earth out, and those who abstained, not wanting to risk their own position by defending humans. When the final count was announced, the result was clear. Humanity was expelled from the Galactic Coalition effective immediately. Helen stood there numb. 30 years of diplomatic work, decades of Earth trying to prove itself worthy, all destroyed in a few days. Captain Price put his hand on her shoulder. "It is not your fault," he said. But the Vokari were not satisfied with just kicking humanity out. High Counselor Threxus stood before the council one more time. "The Vokari Collective demands blood debt. According to our ancient laws, a life taken must be paid with a life. We demand that Lieutenant Cooper be handed over to face Vokari justice." The message was sent to Earth. President Carter's response was immediate and firm. "We do not hand over our citizens to foreign powers. Lieutenant Cooper will face justice under Earth law." The standoff began. Vokari warships started gathering at the edge of Earth's solar system. Other Coalition species, either out of loyalty to the Vokari or seeing an opportunity for themselves, joined them. Within weeks, a fleet of over 300 alien ships formed a wall around the solar system. No ships could get in or out. Earth was trapped. Jake watched from Gateway 7 as the station was evacuated. All unnecessary personnel were being sent down to Earth in shuttles. Only a small crew stayed to keep the station running. We should go too, Lisa said. There's nothing more we can do here. But Jake shook his head. Someone needs to keep communication channels open. If even one species is willing to talk, we need to be here to listen. Dan Cooper was transferred to a secure facility on Earth. He was not in prison, but he was not free either. He spent his days being questioned by investigators, lawyers, and military officers. Everyone wanted to know exactly what he had been thinking when he pulled the trigger. I thought I was in danger, Dan said for the 100th time. I thought he was going to attack me. But no matter how many times he said it, it did not change anything. One moment of fear had brought Earth to the edge of war. The Coalition fleet sent an ultimatum. It appeared on every screen, every broadcast, every communication device on Earth and throughout the solar system. The message was simple. Surrender Lieutenant Cooper within 72 hours or face the consequences. Earth's military scrambled to prepare. Defense platforms around the planet were activated. Ships that had been in storage were brought online. Soldiers who had retired were called back to duty. But everyone knew the truth. Humanity's weapons were a generation behind most Coalition species. In a real fight, Earth would lose. President Carter held another meeting with her advisors. Options? She asked. We could surrender Cooper, someone suggested. Save Earth and sacrifice one man. No, Carter said firmly. The moment we do that, we tell the galaxy that humans can be intimidated. That we will abandon our own to save ourselves. We might survive, but we would lose who we are. Then we fight, Admiral Bennett said, and we make it cost them everything. On the third day, as the deadline approached, something unexpected happened. A single Vocari shuttle approached Gateway 7. Jake received the message that they wanted to dock. This could be a trap, Lisa warned. Or it could be a chance for peace, Jake replied. Either way, I have to try. He went to the docking bay personally with a security team behind him. The airlock opened and Trademaster Scrath emerged, flanked by 2 guards. We have come to collect the human murderer, Scrath announced. Jake stood straight, showing no fear. That is not going to happen. Lieutenant Cooper is on Earth, protected by our military. But I am authorized to discuss alternatives. Compensation, formal apologies, whatever it takes to avoid bloodshed. Scrath's eyes narrowed. You continue to protect the one who killed our own. This proves all humans share his guilt. Then everything happened fast. Scrath made a gesture. His guards raised their weapons. Jake's security team responded instantly. Energy beams crossed the docking bay. Someone's shot went wide and hit the outer. The hull breach was small, just a few inches across, but in the docking bay it was deadly. Air rushed out into space with a sound like thunder. Everything not bolted down flew toward the hole. Jake felt himself being pulled, his magnetic boots losing their grip on the floor. He slammed into the emergency bulkhead as it sealed the breach. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. Something sharp had torn through his suit during those few seconds of vacuum. He could feel the cold of space touching his skin. Lisa reached him first. Her suit was intact. She dragged him away from the sealed door, her hands shaking as she tried to apply emergency patches to his torn suit. Medical team to docking bay 3. She screamed into her communicator. Commander down! I repeat, Commander down. Jake tried to breathe, but his lungs would not work right. He could taste blood. Through the pain, he saw Lisa's face above him, tears streaming down her cheeks. He wanted to tell her it was okay, but he could not get the words out. Tell them, Jake managed to whisper. His voice was so quiet Lisa had to lean close to hear. Tell them this changes nothing. Do not let them use this as an excuse, those were his last words. Commander Jake Morrison died there on the deck of Gateway 7, staring up at the ceiling of the station he had called home. He was 32 years old. The medical team arrived too late. Lisa sat next to Jake's body, still holding the emergency patches in her hands. The Vocari had retreated back to their shuttle during the chaos. Now they were gone, leaving only death behind. News of Jake's death reached Earth within the hour. It spread across the planet like wildfire. People who had never met Jake Morrison suddenly knew his name. They saw his picture on every screen. A young commander who had tried to find peace, killed while attempting to negotiate. President Carter received the news while in a meeting with military commanders. Someone handed her a tablet with the report. She read it once, then read it again, as if reading it twice might change the words. Then she set the tablet down carefully and looked at the people around her. One human for one Vocari. she said quietly. "They will claim the blood debt is paid now. They will say this makes everything even." "Does it?" someone asked. Carter's eyes were hard. "Not even close." She addressed both Earth and the Coalition fleet. Her speech was broadcast everywhere. Commander Jake Morrison died trying to find a peaceful solution. His last words were a plea for restraint. "In his memory, I will make one final offer to the Coalition. Withdraw your forces. Accept a formal inquiry into both incidents. Let justice be served fairly. We will do the same." The Coalition's response came not from the Council, but from the Vokari fleet commander. His message was short and brutal. "One human dead for one Vokari dead. The blood debt is paid. Now you will face justice for your crimes against the Coalition." 6 hours later, the first energy weapons struck Earth's outer defense platforms. The Battle of Earth had begun. Admiral Kate Bennett commanded Earth's defense from the orbital station Sentinel Prime. She watched the alien fleet advance, their weapons charging for another salvo. She had prepared for this moment, hoped it would never come, but prepared nonetheless. "All platforms fall back to close planetary defense," she ordered. Her voice was calm, but everyone could hear the steel beneath it. "Ground-based railguns to maximum charge. Launch all fighter squadrons." The alien fleet outnumbered Earth's forces 3-1. Their weapons were more powerful. Their shields were stronger. But they did not understand human desperation. Captain Nicole Barnes commanded the destroyer Defiant. She was one of the youngest ship captains in the fleet, only 29. With dark skin and eyes that never stopped calculating angles and distances, she watched the Vokari cruiser approaching her position. "Take us behind the moon," she ordered her helmsman. "Use it as cover." The Defiant raced toward Earth's moon, the Vokari cruiser following. The alien ship was bigger, stronger, more heavily armed. But it was also more predictable. As soon as the Defiant cleared the moon's horizon, Nicole ordered full stop. The ship spun on its axis, bringing all weapons to bear. The Vokari cruiser came around the moon expecting to chase. Instead, it flew straight into the Defiant's firing solution. "Fire everything," Nicole said. The concentrated barrage hit the Vokari cruiser's reactor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the alien ship exploded in a ball of fire and debris. It was the first Coalition ship destroyed in the battle, and it would not be the last. Major Kevin Lynch led a fighter squadron called the Hornets. They were fast, agile, and desperate. They could not match the alien fighters in direct combat, so they did not try. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before the enemy could respond. "Remember your training," Kevin told his pilots. "We are not trying to win dogfights. We are trying to stay alive and make them bleed." The battle raged for 3 days. Earth's orbital defenses took heavy damage. The Singapore space elevator, a massive structure that connected the planet's surface to orbit, was severed. The upper portion drifted into space. The lower portion fell, burning up in the atmosphere and scattering debris across the Pacific Ocean. Gateway 7, already damaged from Jake's death, took multiple direct hits. The station broke apart, sections spinning off into space. Lisa watched from Earth as the place she had worked for 3 years was destroyed. Jake's body was still up there somewhere, she knew, lost among the wreckage. Thousands of humans died in the battle. Ships were destroyed. Defense platforms were reduced to molten metal. But Earth kept fighting. On the ground, people watched the battle in the sky. They saw flashes of light as ships exploded. They saw streaks as debris burned through the atmosphere. And they waited, wondering if the next explosion would be the one that broke through Earth's defenses. President Carter worked from a bunker deep underground. Reports came in constantly. A platform destroyed here, a ship lost there, but also victories. An alien cruiser disabled, a fighter wing forced to retreat. Humanity was losing, but slowly, making the aliens pay for every inch. Commander Greg Phillips watched from his monitoring station beyond Pluto. His screens showed the entire solar system. He had been tracking Coalition fleet movements for days. Now he saw something that made him sit up straight. "Admiral Bennett," he called. "You need to see this. We have a massive energy signature at the edge of the system." Every sensor on both sides of the battle detected it simultaneously. Something huge was coming out of hyperspace. The energy readings were enormous, dwarfing anything in the current battle. "Identify that signature," Kate Bennett demanded. The technician's voice shook as he replied. "It is the Drimith Armada. Flagship is the War Herald Unyielding." Silence fell across Earth's command center. The Drumath were legends. They were a warrior species that had conquered half their own galaxy before joining the Coalition. Their military was one of the most powerful in known space. If they were entering the battle on the Coalition side, Earth was finished. The Drumath Armada emerged from hyperspace like ancient gods of war, massive battleships that made the largest Coalition vessels look small. Hundreds of them, all bearing the mark of the War Herald unyielding. Kate Bennett watched them approach and felt something she had not allowed herself to feel since the battle began. Fear. Real, cold fear. Earth could not fight the Coalition and the Drumath combined. It was impossible. But then something strange happened. The Drumath ships did not join the attack. Instead, they formed a line between Earth and the Coalition fleet. They were not firing on anyone, but their position was clear. They were protecting Earth. War Herald Torvin's voice came over all frequencies, speaking in the deep, rumbling language of the Drumath. Translators across the system converted his words. The Drumath withdraw from this conflict. What we witness here is not justice, but slaughter. The human Morrison died trying to prevent bloodshed. There is no honor in punishing an entire species for the actions of one frightened soldier. We will not participate in this dishonor. The message continued. We Drumath are warriors. We understand the heat of battle, the fear that drives a soldier to act. We also understand honor. What the Coalition does here today is without honor. Therefore, we stand aside, and if the Coalition wishes to continue this attack, they must go through us first. The Coalition fleet stopped its advance. The Vokari commander sent angry messages to the Drumath, demanding they move aside. But Torvin's response was simple. We will not move. Make your choice. For long minutes, nothing happened. The Coalition fleet held position. The Drumath fleet held position, and Earth's battered defenders waited, barely able to believe what was happening. Then slowly, the Coalition fleet began to withdraw. It started with a few ships, species that had never been fully committed to the attack. Then more followed. The Vokari held out the longest, their ships maintaining position even as their allies departed. But eventually, even they had to accept reality. They could not fight both Earth and the Drumath. Within 6 hours, the Coalition fleet had withdrawn beyond the solar system's edge. The Battle of Earth was over. Earth had survived, but the cost was terrible. Thousands dead. Orbital infrastructure destroyed. Ships lost. And Jake Morrison, the man who had tried to prevent all of this, dead in the wreckage of Gateway 7. Lisa stood at a memorial service held in Jake's honor. There was no body. The Coalition fleet stayed at the edge of the solar system like a pack of wolves waiting for their chance. They did not attack again, but they did not leave either. Earth was trapped, cut off from the galaxy, surrounded by enemies who waited for any sign of weakness. President Carter called a meeting of her top advisors. They met in a secure bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, far from any city. The room was plain, just a long table and chairs. But the decisions made there would shape humanity's future for generations. We survived, Carter said, looking at the faces around the table. Barely. If the Drumath had not intervened, we would all be dead right now. We cannot count on that happening again. Commander Greg Phillips stood and activated a holographic display of the solar system. Points of light showed where defense platforms had been destroyed, where ships had been lost. There were too many red marks. They tested us, Greg said, and they found us weak. Our technology is 20 years behind theirs. Our weapons are less powerful. Our shields are weaker. The only reason we survived was determination and luck. Next time, luck might not be enough. Admiral Kate Bennett nodded. Her uniform was rumpled and she had dark circles under her eyes from days without sleep. We need to rebuild. Fast. But we also need to do more than rebuild. We need to advance beyond anything the Coalition has. That is impossible, someone said. We do not have access to Coalition technology anymore. How can we advance without their knowledge? Lisa Hayes spoke up. She had been quiet until now, sitting at the far end of the table. We have something they do not have. Motivation. They expelled us because they feared how fast we were advancing. They attacked us because one human made a mistake. They have shown us that we cannot trust them, cannot rely on them. That fear, that anger, That determination to never be vulnerable again, that is more powerful than any technology. President Carter looked at Lisa for a long moment. What are you proposing? Lisa stood and walked to the holographic display. With a gesture, she expanded it to show not just the solar system, but the space beyond. We turn Earth into a fortress. We make the solar system impenetrable. Every planet, every moon, every large asteroid gets a weapons platform. We create a defensive network so dense that nothing gets through without our permission. The resources required would be enormous, the Secretary of Defense said. We would have to transform our entire economy. Then we transform it, Carter said simply. We do whatever is necessary, because the alternative is being at the mercy of species that have already shown they have no mercy. The plan that emerged from that meeting was called the Solar Defense Initiative. It was ambitious to the point of seeming impossible. It required every nation on Earth to work together. It required scientists, engineers, factory workers, miners, and billions of ordinary people to dedicate themselves to a single goal, making sure that what happened to Jake Morrison would never happen again. Greg Phillips was put in charge of the entire project. He worked 20-hour days, coordinating efforts across the planet and throughout the solar system. When people said something was impossible, he found a way to make it possible. Admiral Bennett rebuilt the space fleet. She took the surviving ships and used them as templates for new designs. But these were not copies of the old ships. They were better, faster, armed with weapons that human engineers had designed from scratch. We are not trying to match coalition technology, she told her design teams. We are trying to surpass it. Lisa led the scientific research efforts. She had teams studying every piece of coalition technology they could find, every recording of alien biology, every cultural detail they had gathered. We need to understand them better than they understand themselves, she said. Every weakness, every limitation, every blind spot. Dan Cooper was released from custody. The charges against him were quietly dropped. After everything that had happened, prosecuting him seemed pointless. But Dan could not forgive himself. He saw Jake Morrison's face in his dreams. He saw Grash falling. He saw the flashes of the Battle of Earth. He asked to be transferred to the training division. I never want another young officer to be put in the position I was in, he told his superiors. I want to develop better protocols, better training, better ways to handle first contact situations. They let him. Dan spent the next 30 years writing training manuals, developing simulation programs, teaching young officers how to avoid the mistakes he had made. He never married, never had children. His entire life became about making sure his moment of fear never happened to anyone else. The years passed. Earth changed in ways that would have seemed impossible before the war. The planet that had once been divided into competing nations became truly unified. Everyone understood that survival required working together. Massive construction projects began across the solar system. On Mars, human colonists built weapons platforms into the sides of Olympus Mons. The asteroid belt was turned into a network of defense stations, each one capable of defending itself and supporting its neighbors. Even distant Pluto received defensive installations. The technology advanced rapidly. Human scientists, cut off from coalition knowledge, had to invent everything themselves. And in doing so, they often found better solutions than what the aliens had developed. Dr. Ryan Clark led the Weapons Research Division. He was young, only 30, but brilliant. His team developed new types of energy weapons that were more efficient than anything the coalition used. They rely on established science, Ryan explained. We have to be creative. That gives us an edge. Engineer Sarah Mills designed the shield systems that protected Earth's new defense platforms. Her shields could absorb more energy and regenerate faster than coalition shields. I studied how they build their shields, she said. Then I figured out how to build them better. The Drumoth, who had defended Earth during the battle, were granted special status. They were allowed to maintain a small embassy on Mars, the only alien presence permitted in the solar system. War Herald Torvin, who had commanded the fleet that saved Earth, stayed as an unofficial protector. Torvin met with President Carter several times. He was massive, even for a Drumath with battle scars across his armored skin. But he spoke with surprising gentleness through his translator. "Your species has something rare," he told Carter during one meeting. "You have the ability to transform trauma into strength. The Coalition thought by expelling you, by attacking you, they would break you. Instead, they created something far more dangerous. A unified, focused humanity with a purpose. We just want to be left alone," Carter said. "That is what makes you dangerous," Torvin replied. "Species that want to conquer can be negotiated with. Species that want power can be bribed. But a species that simply wants to protect itself, that will sacrifice everything for survival, that is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." 25 years after the Battle of Earth, the last piece of the Solar Defense Initiative was activated. Over 10,000 weapons platforms now protected the solar system. Each one was equipped with technology that had been reverse-engineered, improved upon, and in many cases completely revolutionized by human ingenuity. Greg Phillips, now in his 60s but still sharp as ever, stood in the command center as the final platform came online. Around him, technicians monitored screens showing the entire defensive network. Every planet, every moon, every strategic point in the solar system was covered. "System check complete," a technician announced. "All platforms responding, all weapons ready. The perimeter is secure." Greg allowed himself a small smile. "Then we are ready." Ready for what, he did not say. But everyone knew. They were ready for the Coalition to try again. And this time, the outcome would be very different. The Coalition watched Earth's transformation with growing concern. Intelligence reports showed the massive military buildup. Some species argued for a preemptive strike, destroying Earth before it became too powerful. But the Drumath made it clear they would defend Earth again if necessary. And after seeing what Earth had built, many Coalition species were no longer sure they could win. Earth also began to expand beyond the solar system, but not toward Coalition space. President Carter, now in her second decade of leadership, made the strategic decision to avoid the crowded, controlled sectors where the Coalition operated. "Let them keep their space," she said. "There is a whole galaxy out there, most of it unexplored. We will find our own path." The first colony ship launched 50 years after Jake Morrison's death. It was named Morrison's Hope, in honor of the man who had died trying to prevent war. 10,000 colonists were aboard, heading to a star system, 200 light-years from Earth, far from any Coalition territory. Lisa Hayes, now 78 years old, attended the launch ceremony. She had spent half a century working to ensure Earth's survival. Now she watched as humanity took its first steps toward becoming a truly multi-system civilization. "Jake would have liked this," she said quietly to herself. "He believed in human potential. He believed we could be better." The colony ship jumped to hyperspace, its engines based on technology that was purely human. Not copied from the Coalition, not borrowed, not stolen. Created from scratch by human scientists who had been forced to innovate or die. More ships followed, dozens, then hundreds. Human colonies spread across unexplored. 100 years after Jake Morrison died aboard Gateway 7, the Coalition Council held another vote concerning humanity. But this time the situation was very different. The council chamber looked the same as it had a century before. The same semicircle of seats, the same mix of strange alien species, but the atmosphere was completely changed. Where once there had been anger and certainty, now there was uncertainty and concern. Ambassador Peter Stone represented Earth at this meeting. He was the great-grandson of one of the soldiers who had fought in the Battle of Earth. Unlike his ancestor, Peter had never seen combat. He had grown up in a solar system that had never been threatened, protected by the defensive network that now made Earth untouchable. The Coalition Council wishes to formally apologize to the people of Earth, the current council speaker announced. She was a Meridian, one of the species that had refused to attack Earth all those years ago. "We recognize that our actions were driven by fear and prejudice rather than justice. We invite humanity to rejoin the Galactic Coalition, with full membership and unprecedented protections." Peter stood in the center of the chamber, exactly where Ambassador Helen Grant had stood a century ago. He took his time, letting the silence stretch. Then he spoke 4 simple words. "We respectfully decline." A murmur went through the assembled aliens. They had expected negotiation, discussion, perhaps demands for concessions. They had not expected a flat refusal. "Perhaps you misunderstood," the speaker said carefully. "We are offering full restoration of membership. Trade rights, technology sharing, security guarantees, everything." "I understood perfectly," Peter replied, "and my answer remains the same. Earth declines your offer." He pulled up a holographic document and transmitted it to every representative in the chamber. "My government asked me to provide a detailed explanation. I think you will find it enlightening." The document began with a history lesson. It recounted the death of Grash, the expulsion of humanity, the blockade, and the Battle of Earth. It described how Jake Morrison had died trying to find peace, and how that peace had been denied. Then it moved to the century that followed, the construction of the Solar Defense Initiative, the expansion of human colonies into unexplored space, the development of technology that now rivaled or exceeded coalition standards, the establishment of trade relationships with individual species on human terms. In the past 100 years, Peter's message continued, humanity has learned a valuable lesson. We learned that membership in the coalition is not necessary for survival or prosperity. We learned that we are stronger when we rely on ourselves rather than on the goodwill of others. Most importantly, we learned that you cannot be trusted. The words were harsh but delivered without emotion. This was not anger speaking. This was cold, calculated policy. "We do not seek revenge," Peter said, now speaking directly rather than from the document. "We bear no specific hatred toward any species in this room. But we will never again put ourselves in a position where our survival depends on your votes, your mercy, or your sense of justice. One human died in orbit a century ago, and in response you tried to destroy our entire world. That is a lesson we will never forget." The council speaker tried to respond. "Circumstances were different then. Emotions were high. Surely you can understand that mistakes were made on both sides." "Mistakes." Peter repeated the word as if tasting something bitter. "You call attempting to destroy an entire species a mistake. That tells us everything we need to know about the coalition's values." He deactivated the hologram and prepared to leave. "Earth will continue to trade with individual coalition species who approach us honestly and fairly. We will share scientific knowledge when it benefits both parties. We will even provide aid in emergencies because that is who we are. But we will not rejoin the coalition. We will not subject ourselves to your authority, and we will not forget what you were willing to do to us." As Peter walked out of the council chamber, he felt a sense of satisfaction. A century of work, of sacrifice, of determination had led to this moment. Earth did not need the coalition's acceptance. Earth had moved beyond that need entirely. Back on Earth, people watched the broadcast and cheered. The refusal was celebrated across the human colonies. Songs were written about it. Children learned about it in school. The day Earth said no to the coalition became a holiday, a reminder of human independence. Lisa Hayes died 2 years after that vote. She was 105 years old, having lived long enough to see Earth transformed from a vulnerable newcomer to the galactic community into a power that commanded respect through strength. At her funeral, thousands gathered to honor the woman who had worked alongside Jake Morrison and spent her life ensuring his death meant something. She never forgot him, one of her colleagues said during the eulogy. Every system she designed, every protocol she developed, every decision she made, she was thinking about Jake, about making sure no other human died the way he did. The ruins of Gateway 7 still orbited Earth, preserved as a memorial. No one had tried to salvage it or clear it away. It remained there, a twisted wreck of metal and memories, a reminder of what had happened and why it must never happen again. Young people often took trips up to view the memorial station that had been built near the ruins. They floated in zero gravity, looking at the old structure, learning about the events that had shaped their world. Commander Jake Morrison's name was inscribed on a monument at the memorial station. Beneath his name were the words he had spoken before he died. "Tell them this changes nothing. Do not let them use this as an excuse." Historians debated what Jake had meant by those words. Some thought he was asking Earth to stay calm, to not use his death as justification for war. Others believed he was warning the coalition not to claim his death as payment for Grash's. But most people understood the truth. Jake's words had changed everything, just not in the way he intended. They had become a rallying cry, a reminder that Earth would never again be pushed around, never again be vulnerable, never again trust that others would protect human lives. Dan Cooper died at the age of 93, having spent 70 years trying to atone for pulling a trigger in a moment of fear. His training programs were used throughout the human military. His protocols for first contact situations were studied in every military academy. At his funeral, a 5-star general spoke about his contributions. Lieutenant Cooper made a mistake that cost thousands of lives, but he spent the rest of his life making sure that mistake could never be repeated. In doing so, he may have saved millions more. The Coalition's power continued to decline over the decades. Member species began to question the leadership that had made such catastrophic errors with humanity. Internal conflicts arose. Some species left the Coalition entirely. Others stayed but refused to follow council directives they disagreed with. The Vocari collective, once influential, found themselves increasingly isolated. Their aggressive tactics, which had worked before humanity's expulsion, now made other species wary. Young Vocari, born long after the events at Gateway 7, struggled to understand why their people were viewed with such suspicion. One young Vocari diplomat, a female named Skresh, requested a meeting with human representatives. It took 3 years of persistent attempts before Earth agreed. The meeting took place on Mars in the Drumath embassy. Skresh was only 30 years old, a third of Jake Morrison's age when he died. She had grown up with the story of Gresh's death and the war that followed. "I come to apologize," she told the human diplomats, "not on behalf of the collective, which refuses to admit wrongdoing, but personally. What my ancestors did to your world was wrong. I cannot change the past, but I want you to know that some Vocari understand this." The human diplomat, a middle-aged woman named Rachel James, studied Skresh carefully. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care what happened a century ago?" "Because it still affects us," Skresh said. "The Vocari are paying the price for what Trademaster Scrath and High Counselor Threxus did. Other species do not trust us. They see us as aggressive, dangerous, without honor. My generation wants to change that, but we cannot do it alone." Rachel considered this. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing," Skresh said. "I want nothing. I just wanted you to know that not all Vocari believe what happened was justified. Some of us understand that fear and pride drove our ancestors to terrible choices. It was a small gesture, but it was noted. Over the following years, younger Vocari made similar overtures. Earth remained cautious, never fully trusting, but recognized that species could change, could learn from their mistakes. The Drumath continued their unusual relationship with humanity. War Herald Torvin eventually returned to his people, but other Drumath took his place at the Mars embassy. They provided intelligence about coalition movements, warned of potential threats, and occasionally asked for human assistance with problems in their own territory. It was a friendship born from respect. The Drumath admired human determination. Humans appreciated Drumath honor. Neither species fully trusted the other, but both knew they could rely on each other when it mattered. 200 years after Jake Morrison's death, Earth's sphere of influence encompassed over 500 star systems. Human colonies thrived on hundreds of worlds. The population of humanity. Admiral Christopher Lee faced a decision that would define Earth's role in the galaxy. The Coalition fleet waited at the edge of the solar system, 200 ships representing the organization that had once tried to destroy humanity. Now they came asking for help. "Permission to approach is denied," Christopher said firmly, "but we will send a diplomatic shuttle to your position. You will explain your situation in detail, and then we will decide how Earth responds." The shuttle that launched carried Ambassador Rachel James, the same diplomat who had met with the young Vocari decades before. She was 70 now, with gray hair and a lifetime of experience dealing with alien politics. With her went a security team and enough weapons to fight their way out if this was a trap. The Coalition flagship was called Unity's Dream. Rachel found that name darkly amusing given the current situation. She was escorted to a conference room where Fleet Commander Darvin waited along with representatives from a dozen different species. Darvin was a centauri, a species that looked almost human except for their silver skin and extra set of arms. He rose when Rachel entered, a gesture of respect. "Ambassador James, thank you for meeting with us. Explain. Rachel said simply, taking a seat. 200 years ago, your coalition tried to exterminate my people. Now you come asking for help. I need to understand why we should even consider listening. Darwin nodded as if he had expected this reaction. The coalition is collapsing. The systems that held us together are breaking down. 3 major species have left, declaring themselves independent. Wars have started over disputed territories. Trade routes are being blocked. Colonies are being raided. We are sliding toward chaos. And you think Earth can stop this? Rachel asked. Why? What makes you believe we would even want to? A Selenar representative, a being of pure energy contained in a force field, spoke up. Its voice came through a translator as soft chimes. Because you are the only power strong enough to intervene, that is not part of the conflict. Because your technology has surpassed ours in many areas. Because you have built something we failed to build, a stable multi-system civilization that works. Rachel considered this. You want us to enforce peace? To be your military arm? No, Darwin said quickly. We want you to be mediators. Neutral parties. Every species in the coalition knows your history. They know you were wronged. That gives you a unique position. You have no stake in our internal politics. No territorial ambitions in coalition space. You simply want to be left alone. That makes you the only ones both sides might listen to. Both sides of what? Rachel asked. Darwin activated a holographic display showing a map of coalition space. Large sections were highlighted in red. The Vocari Collective has formed an alliance with the Krillian Hive and several smaller species. They claim the Coalition Council has become weak and corrupt. They want to reform it under their control. On the other side, the Meridian Collective and its allies want to maintain the current structure. Neither side will compromise. War is inevitable unless someone can bring them to the table. Rachel studied the map. She saw strategic choke points, resource-rich systems, colony worlds that would be caught in the crossfire, billions of lives at risk. And if we refuse, if we simply let you tear yourselves apart, then the galaxy burns, the Selenar said simply. And eventually the fire will spread to your colonies. You may have secured the solar system, but your settlements in deep space are vulnerable. Pirates, refugees, hostile forces fleeing coalition space, they will all end up in your territory. You cannot truly isolate yourself from what happens here. It was a fair point. Earth's colonies were strong but spread out. If the coalition collapsed into total war, the chaos would eventually reach human space. Better to deal with the problem now than wait for it to arrive at their doorstep. I need to consult with my government, Rachel said. This is not a decision I can make alone. The debate on Earth lasted for weeks. President Marcus Webb, Earth's current leader, heard arguments from all sides. Military leaders warned that getting involved in coalition politics was exactly what they had avoided for 2 centuries. Scientists pointed out opportunities to study coalition technology and biology up close. Economists noted the trade benefits of a stable galactic community. But it was a historian named Professor Ellen Wright who made the argument that swayed the decision. She was 85 years old, one of the leading experts on the events surrounding Jake Morrison's death. We have spent 200 years making ourselves strong enough that no one could hurt us again, Ellen told the assembled leaders. We succeeded. Earth is secure, but isolation was never the goal. It was a means of survival. Now we are strong enough to engage with the galaxy on our own terms, not as suppliants begging for acceptance, but as equals offering assistance. What about Jake Morrison's sacrifice? Someone asked. What about never forgetting what they did to us? Jake Morrison died trying to prevent bloodshed, Ellen replied. He believed in peace and cooperation. We honored his memory by making Earth strong. Now we can honor it by using that strength to prevent another tragedy, not for their sake, but because it is who we are. President Webb made his decision. We will offer our services as mediators, but on our terms. The negotiations will take place in neutral space, at a location of our choosing. Both sides must agree to a ceasefire during talks. And if either side acts in bad faith, we withdraw immediately. The location chosen was a space station built specifically for this purpose, positioned exactly halfway between Earth and Coalition space. It was called the Morrison Station, named after the man whose death had defined humanity's path. The station itself was a marvel of human engineering. It could house thousands of beings from dozens of different species, each with their own environmental needs. It had meeting rooms equipped with the most advanced translation technology. And it had enough defensive weaponry to fight off a small fleet just in case. Ambassador Rachel James led the human delegation. With her came experts in alien psychology, galactic law, economics, and military strategy. They were supported by the most advanced artificial intelligence systems humanity had developed, capable of analyzing millions of possible outcomes in real time. The Vocari delegation arrived first. They were led by High Minister Thex, a direct descendant of the Threxes who had pushed for Earth's expulsion 2 centuries ago. Thex was old, his scales dull with age, but his mind was still sharp. When he met Rachel, he bowed in the Vocari manner. "I must acknowledge the past. My ancestor wronged your people terribly. I cannot undo that, but I can work to ensure better relations in the future." Rachel appreciated the gesture, but remained cautious. "Words are easy, Minister. Let us see if your actions match them." The Meridian delegation came next, followed by representatives from dozens of other species. The station filled with aliens of every type, all suspicious of each other, all convinced they were right. The negotiations were difficult from the start. Old grievances surfaced. Accusations were thrown. Several times delegations threatened to leave, but Rachel and her team kept everyone talking. They used techniques developed specifically for multi-species negotiations. They broke large problems into smaller, manageable pieces. They found common ground on minor issues first, building trust before tackling major disputes. They made it clear that Earth would walk away if anyone resorted to threats or violence. Slowly, painfully, progress was made. The key breakthrough came 6 months into the negotiations. The Vocari delegation proposed splitting the coalition into regional sectors, each with more autonomy. The Meridian delegation countered that this would fragment the organization beyond repair. They were at an impasse. Rachel suggested a compromise based on human history. Earth once had similar problems. Different nations wanted independence, but complete separation would have caused chaos. We created a federal system, a central government handling issues that affected everyone, with regional governments managing local concerns. Perhaps the coalition could do something similar. It was not a perfect solution, but it gave both sides something. The Vocari got their autonomy. The Meridians kept a unified structure. It took another 6 months to work out the details, but eventually, a framework emerged. The Treaty of Morrison Station, as it came to be called, restructured the coalition into 5 regional sectors. Each sector had its own council handling internal matters. A smaller central council dealt with issues affecting the entire coalition, like defense and intersector trade. The voting system was revised to prevent any single species from dominating decisions. When the treaty was finally signed, representatives from 47 species added their marks to the document. It was broadcast across the galaxy. The coalition had been reformed, and war had been prevented. High Minister Thex approached Rachel after the signing ceremony. "Your people have done something remarkable. You could have let us destroy ourselves. Instead, you helped us find a path forward. Why?" Rachel thought about Jake Morrison, about the station named in his honor, about 2 centuries of human history shaped by his death. Because holding grudges forever does not bring back the dead. Because we are strong enough now to afford mercy, and because preventing unnecessary death is always the right choice. As the delegations departed Morrison Station, Earth received messages.